As those in power in the 6 counties move to mark the centenary of its foundation, a significant date no doubt, let us remember just one aspect of what was significant about it: 100 years of special powers. "100 years ago, at the inception of Partition and with the birth of the rotten little statelet they call Northern Ireland, the ruling classes sought to provide the state with as much security powers as possible in order to ensure its survival. One of the most repressive pieces of legislation ever produced was born, the Special Powers Act. The powers contained within it oversaw the rampant discrimination of generations of Irish nationalists and Catholics. Its imposition was unprecedented in that it gave the North's Minister for Home Affairs the powers to do pretty much whatever they wanted. It allowed the new regime to take any steps at all which it thought necessary, and it was used almost exclusively on the minority population. The Act was heralded by unionists as necessary to maintain the constitutional structure of the new state, the state that they controlled. In short, it was a question of ensuring Orange supremacy and their continued dominance over that minority. Those Catholics now living within the new state would face arbitrary arrest, imprisonment, and ensure that they knew that should they stay within its borders, they would remain second-class citizens. The Special Powers Act conferred wide powers of arrest without warrant, including search and questioning, upon the Royal Ulster Constabulary and the B Specials. They had the power to detain whoever they wanted, to put them before juryless courts, to hang them, to flog them, and to prevent coroners' inquests whenever it deemed it against state interests. It allowed for the prohibition of public meetings and processions, and for the banning of organisations and what it deemed seditious literature, including newspapers. Additionally, it gave the state power to make further regulations, each with the force of a new law, without consulting Parliament, and the ability to delegate that power to any policeman. Most notably, it allowed the state to impose curfews and to imprison whoever it wanted without trial, which it did in every decade since its inception until 1975, when internment, as we knew it then, came to an end. Little wonder then that John Vorster, the South African Minister for Justice during the apartheid regime, when introducing the new coercion bill in 1963, he commented that he would be willing to exchange all the legislation for just one clause of the Northern Ireland Special Powers Act. Eventually repealed in 1972, as Stormont fell and the war raged on, it was replaced with the equally repressive Emergency Provisions Act, an act that introduced the much loathed diplock courts, formally introducing trials with no jury. Over many decades, the British state has benefited from the reintroduction and the repackaging of various forms of supposedly new legislation, which has conveyed upon the RUC and subsequently the PSNI a number of similar measures that were previously subject to challenge. As each new act of repressive powers neared an end, brought about by public campaigns, by legal processes or papal power, the state had learned that its preparedness would allow the reintroduction of those same powers in a different form or under a different name. The defeat of those powers used arbitrarily against the Irish nationalist population of the state, quickly replaced with other measures, allowed the PSNI to go about its business as it did before. More worryingly, it has allowed the state to further legally refine each power as it is reenacted within new legislation, creating a scenario where those powers, often deemed the most discriminatory, are now more difficult to curtail. In January of 2010, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that Section 44 of the Terrorism Act 2000 breached privacy rights afforded by the European Convention on Human Rights. This section gave the PSNI the power to indiscriminately stop and search people without reasonable suspicion. Additionally, it allowed the state to designate huge areas within which this could happen. Following its repeal, the PSNI quickly put to use the new Justice and Security Act, which had been brought to bear just years previous, and no doubt in anticipation of the ending of Section 44. This new act now allows the PSNI to enter any premises it reasonably suspects may contain munitions. It allows them to stop and forcibly search any individual it deems may be carrying munitions or wireless apparatus, whatever that means. As an indication of the overuse of these repackaged powers over the past decade, over 374,000 people have been forcibly stopped and searched by the PSNI, the equivalent of 1/5 of the population of the 6-county state, with children as young as 13 years of age being subject to such searches. Whilst the PSNI holds the third highest stop and search rate for British state forces, it has the lowest arrest rate, corresponding to other figures indicating that the powers it utilises are being overused. Indeed, There's been a 74% increase in PSNI stop and searches since 2005, and the PSNI's refusal to record the community background of those they subject to stop and search is no doubt motivated by the desire to mask the sectarian and politically motivated nature of their force. The past 100 years of this state, the length of its existence, has seen the consistent use of various legislative powers against the mostly Irish nationalist population. As those in power in the 6 counties move to mark the centenary of its foundation, a significant date no doubt, let us remember just one aspect of what was significant about it: 100 years of special powers.